Hi, I'm Steve. Welcome to Hateley Motorsport. Today, you're going to learn something, hopefully. So, the most requested video that we've had since we started this YouTube channel a couple of years ago has been about squaring the car and blocking the car. So today I'm going to try and finally get around to doing it. First up, we're going to back off all our torsion bar adjusters. You can actually pull them off the end if you really want to, but I'm being lazy today because I've greased these torsion bars recently and I can't bother pulling it all apart. So I'm just going to back them off. So they're backed off. Now we're going to set the car up on some blocks, on the chassis setup blocks. So, chassis setup blocks. Right, that fell off. Now, being that this is a raised rail chassis, and all that means is that this chassis rail here is an inch higher than the chassis rail on the other side. So it's an inch higher up this way than that side. So it just means the chassis rails are offset by an inch. It's going to be a 3-inch block on this side. Yeah, I can't lift it up. And a 4-inch block on the right side. If it's a standard rail chassis, as in the flat, what they call a flat rail chassis, and the chassis rails are even, it's going to be a 4-inch block both sides. First thing we need to check is if the axle's square in the chassis. Now there's a few ways of doing this. You can run tape measures from the chassis out to the kingpins, get it out square. Depending on what length front end you get is going to depend on where it's going to end up. But in every book and setup sheets and everything that I've ever read, it says to do all that and then to go back and check what I'm about to show you. So I just skip all those steps and I check it up here. So, Parnard bar pin on your front end of your chassis rail needs to be centralised between the front, the top, the two chassis arms. So all I do to get the length right is to set that up like so. And normally I just measure it with a tape measure each side and just do one side at a time. But as you can see, that's pretty well dead in the centre. And if I actually measure it, we'll find out we've got 5/8 of an inch there. And 5/8 of an inch there. So, near enough to dead centre. Now if that was wrong, we'd just loosen off that arm and twist that side to side. Right, the next step in the process is to get the axle square with the chassis. And we don't actually set this up a little square, we set it up with a little bit of what we call trail. So I'll actually normally run about 1/4 inch trail. So what that means is that the left hand side of the car, so the wheelbase in the left hand side, is 1/4 inch shorter than the right hand side. Just helps you turn to the left. We only turn left, so it just helps you turn a little bit to the left all the time. So I get all my measurements from the XXX website. This is a XXX chassis. It's been a really good chassis, I've ran that. But your chassis manufacturer will have that information on their website, so you can find out, you know, the measurements you need to do. Otherwise, I'll put a link to XXX's website down here. Go to their website. It'll give you a pretty good idea on what you need to know. Some of the arm links and stuff will be the same, but the measurements from the motor plate and stuff should be all the same. So to do this job, all we're doing is using a straight edge from the motor plate. Get it nice and square, so to the back of the axle, and it should be 46 1/4 this side, the back of the axle. It should be 46 1/4 this side, which we actually are, so that's really good. Normally it's all over the place. And 46 3/8 this side. And well, there you go. We're actually a little bit short this side, so we're going to have to adjust it. Now to adjust it, all we need to do is loosen up our jam nuts on the radius right here. Oh. Aluminium jam nuts are all about worn out. I should get some new ones of them. And we're going to want to turn these radius rods in or out to get the right length. Now we want to try and keep them about the same amount of turns, top and bottom. which way I have to go. Had to go a bit longer, so we'll screw that around a turn. I'll screw this one out a turn, and I'll measure it again. Now, it pays when you're doing this to go back and forth each side to side a couple of times, because when you adjust one side, it will adjust the other side a little bit. Actually, that's pretty well right on now. Just going to double check the other side again. And that's pretty well right on still too. Alright, that'll do. So that's how you set up the axle in relationship to the chassis. Like I said, 1/4 of an inch longer on the right hand side than the left hand side. Now the last step of this process is checking the caster angle. Now I use my phone to do this. Is a level up angle meter. Now to do this, you want to measure the chassis first. Pulls out of the phone case because it's a bit easier. Let me drop my phone now. Measure the angle of the chassis first. So it's -1 degree there. Ooh. And then the angle of the pitman arm here. And that's -13. That's 13 degrees. So 13 minus 12. What's that? So that's 14 degrees of caster, which is probably a little bit much. So I tend to like to run about 12 degrees. Most guys run between 8 and 14, I suppose. And that's just a personal preference thing. I've found, I used to run down around 10, 9 and 10. I found just a little bit more stable in the steering when I was up a little bit higher. So I tend to run around 12 degrees. So to adjust the caster, all you need to do is turn these radius rods, and to keep the axle square in the chassis, or 1/4 of an inch longer as I was talking earlier, you just need to adjust them the same amount. So you can hardly see that there, but I've actually got white lines painted on these. So I'll turn that one, I want a bit less. So I'll turn that one, make that half a turn longer, and I'll make this one half a turn shorter. And we'll check that again. So that's now at 11 degrees. So that's now, well, what was it? The chassis is at -1, so that's at 11 degrees. So that's 12 degrees. So that's spot on. So we'll lock up our adjusters. Now, it pays after you've locked up these adjusters. I'm not going to worry about it now. Alright, so that's the last step in the process of squaring the front end. Now all we've got to do is block the front end, which is actually setting the height of the chassis. And to do that, that's a setup thing that changes with track conditions, and some drivers prefer more and less. And how I tend to do it, I tend to start the night with 3.5 inches in the front end, so 3.5 inch blocks in the front end, which on this chassis, because like I said earlier, is a raised rail, the left hand one's a little bit higher than the right hand one. Is 3.5. You got to take an inch off the left hand side, so it's 3.5 inch block and a 2.5 inch block. So to do that, all we're doing, we'll pull these blocks back out. We'll set this one at 3.5 inches. That block's looking a little worse for wear. I've got to do something about that. I'll have to fix that, replace it, do something. On the left hand side, which I've got to change the end on that one. So 2.5 inches on that side. And the back side. And we wind them down finger tight. I wind them down finger tight and 1/4 of a turn. And same on this one. Finger tight plus 1/4 of a turn. Now, when I initially set it up with this chassis, I also put a half turn in this side. I've just found that's, as a rule, what this car tends to like. We'll probably adjust that before we actually go out and race, depending on track conditions, but that's where I like to start as my baseline. That's it for blocking and squaring the front end. In the next video, we'll do the rear end on how we block and square and set up that. Found this video helpful? Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it amongst your friends, do what you got to do. We'll see you all next time where we're going to square and block the rear end.